Hey everybody, welcome back to History Student Reacts. Today we'll be watching Three Kingdoms by Oversimplified. Now this was a recommendation from one of our wonderful patrons. Thank you so much for all of the support. And if you're not on Patreon, please check it out. It's linked down below. Now we've done a couple of Kings and Generals videos on the Three Kingdoms period of Chinese history, but they were a little more specifically focused. I imagine this one will be a lot more general, and I'm excited to get into it. So, without any further ado, let's jump right in.
This video was made possible by Total War Three Kingdoms, the brand new strategy game from the multi-award winning Total War series. Support my channel by using the link in the description down below to buy the game on Steam. Also, new merch available now in the store, including a mystery new character pin. I wonder who it could be.
Washington?
Ancient China. The sun is shining. The birds are singing.
Wow, that is really ancient.
The children are playing in the village square. What a wonderful time to be alive. Hey, the Yellow River flooded again and destroyed all your crops. And also we're being raided by nomadic tribesmen.
I mean, these are some pretty common features of, frankly, all of Chinese history. Yeah, the river flooded, we're being attacked by nomadic tribesmen. Alright, yeah, keep 1, 2, and 3, right? Repeated, repeated, repeated. This is apparently 2000 BC, which, like I said, is really ancient. But, yeah, these will be features of much of Chinese history.
And also, this period of Chinese history may be entirely mythical, meaning you may not even exist. Well, that would certainly explain the laser eyes.
Yeah, by the way, this is why I am not an ancient historian, whether it be ancient China or ancient Rome or any other ancient civilization. Because there is just such a lack of primary sources. You're dealing with history that it is unclear what is mythical and what is fact. I prefer more modern history, where the evidence is a little more clear, but I very much respect anybody out there who does any sort of ancient history, because there are just way too many gaps for me to handle, but hey, people are out there doing it.
Chinese civilization began around the year 2000 BC when the possibly mythical Xia dynasty was formed. Throughout China's history, dynasties would usually rise up with a powerful leader who worked for the good of the people. But over time, the leaders would become more corrupt and self-serving. Someone would inevitably build a lake of alcohol, and the angry populace would overthrow them, giving way for a new dynasty to rise.
Yeah, there's this idea in Chinese governance called the Mandate of Heaven. It's sometimes compared to sort of European divine right, but the comparison doesn't really make much sense. Right, divine right is this idea that, you know, the monarch was chosen by God to rule, and therefore they rule legitimately. On the face of it, the Mandate of Heaven sounds similar, but there's a crucial difference, which is the idea of the Mandate of Heaven is, yes, the emperor will have the Mandate of Heaven, sort of like divine right, but the emperor will only hold that Mandate of Heaven as long as they rule well. They're a good ruler. You know, if they do not rule over their people well, then they will lose the Mandate of Heaven, right? So it is this sort of legitimizing religious idea, but unlike divine right, if you're not a good emperor, then I don't necessarily know if your people have a right to overthrow you, but you do lose that legitimate Mandate of Heaven. You know, you're no longer seen as a legitimate ruler. So that's sort of an important difference there.
Following this pattern, the Xia dynasty was replaced by the Shang, who liked bronze and writing, but then the leaders got corrupt, and were replaced by the Zhou, who liked iron and philosophy. But that one sort of just fell apart, and was
And once, I mean, you know, we've all seen the Bill Wirtz History of the Entire World, I guess, video. This is a common theme we see in Chinese history, where we see these, and frankly, any empire that has lasted for, or any civilization that has lasted for this long, we're talking thousands of years of history, you are gonna see dynasties rising and falling, controlling different territory, gaining the Mandate of Heaven, then eventually losing it. I mean, we see this repeated many times, but it makes sense given how much time we're dealing with.
Replaced by the Qin, who liked building walls and people made out of rock. But they were pretty tyrannical from the start, and were quickly replaced by the Han, who liked creating new trade routes and getting in touch with their emotions. In line with this pattern, the Han dynasty came about under the strong and popular leadership of Emperor Gaozu. The dynasty remained firmly in place for over 4 centuries, and was considered a golden age in Chinese history, developing new forms of art, political thinking, technology. Oh, looks like all the leaders got corrupt. See, probably the biggest problem in ancient China's political system that allowed so much corruption to come
Hey,
about.
things can't stay good forever. You know what I mean? You see a golden age, a flourishing of art and science and politics. Well, you could bet that after a certain amount of time, that's all going to decline and things are going to get bad. It's just the way of things.
Out all the time was a little something called court culture. Let me explain. Imagine for me, if you will, that you are the son of the Chinese emperor.
Got it.
Hooray! Now, apart from how weird it is that you have a ton of stepmoms, and many of them would like to kill you, and also all of your friends are middle-aged dudes with no dongs.
Okay, that's good. I will say, to make a legitimate, serious comment, that's hilarious. On the concubine culture, we see a similar thing in sort of different cultures. Like, the Ottoman Empire had a big... of course, the Sultan had a harem, a lot of concubines, and they would sort of vie for power. Who would have influence over the Sultan, therefore who would have sort of social and political influence. And then the eunuchs, the eunuchs, and this is also true of a couple of different societies. I mean, eunuchs were pretty powerful in, say, the Byzantine Empire, but in China in particular... and other examples, but I'm just using this one. Eunuchs as a class at court became very powerful. When I think of, say, the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, eunuchs were powerful, but more sort of like individually, whereas, to my understanding, at this time in China, sort of as a class at court, they were powerful as a group, which is sort of interesting.
Life's pretty alright. One day, your father says, "Son, I know our relationship hasn't been the best, and I've never said this before, but I just want to let you know that I love you." Oh no, I'm having a heart attack.
Uh-oh.
Look at you. Now you're the emperor. I'm so proud of you. But wait.
Don't we just love a dynastic monarchical system? Your daddy dies, and then you, as like a 7-year-old, is put on the throne? Isn't it just the best way of running things?
You are but a child and have no idea how to rule over a massive empire. Fret not, because just about everyone in your court wants to help you out with that.
Well, yeah, help you out with that. And by help you out, we mean install themselves as your regent, who is just looking out for you, but in reality is of course looking out for themselves and building their own base of power. Yeah, not a fun time for well, maybe it is a fun time for a young emperor at court. I mean, you're very pampered, you have yes men all around you, but behind the scenes, everyone is manipulating you and vying for their own power, right? So, maybe not great for the long-term health of the empire and your dynasty.
Hey man, remember me? I'm your mom's bro. Anyway, I heard you needed someone to rule over China for you. I mean, to help you rule China. So hey, here's
Right.
a popsicle. I hope we can get along.
Exactly.
No way, man. We've been your friends and your personal caretakers.
I will tell you, the uncles, man, you look at, I feel like in a lot of examples of, young emperor takes over, the uncles are always getting involved, which makes sense. I mean, they're sort of a prevalent male figure in the family. They're going to be sort of middle-aged men ready to rule, maybe with some accomplishments of their own. They're often a power base. You have the mother. Depends. Of course, it depends on the individual, right? But we see a lot of examples of mothers who will basically rule through their children. Empresses, sometimes in name, sometimes not in name. Then we have, of course, court politics. Here we have a class of eunuchs. We might have different groups. All these different familial and political and sometimes military groups vying for power.
Our whole life. And even though we may have no dongs, I think you should give us all the power to rule China.
Right.
I mean, help you rule China.
Right.
So who will you be influenced by? Your scheming uncle or your loyal eunuchs? And towards the end of the hand...
Well, yeah, your loyal eunuchs. It's more like your scheming uncle or your scheming... Everyone's scheming, It's really difficult, I think, in this type of system to find people who will truly be loyal to you. Especially if you're a child who doesn't know anything. But yeah, you can pick between one group of schemers or another group of schemers.
Dynasty. A string of child emperors allowed more and more power to fall into the hands of the eunuchs. Oh no, now they're scheming too. They
Right.
began handing out government jobs for bribes, heavily taxing the poor for their own wealth. And while
Classic.
you're sitting there eating your popsicle, everyone in your court is literally murdering each other to try and consolidate more power and riches for themselves. While all the peasants are outside like, hey, did you guys know there's been a drought out here for 2 years?
Yeah, and I mean, we basically see the decline of the authority of the emperor here. Now, the interesting thing is, and we're leading into the Three Kingdoms period. Throughout the Three Kingdoms period, everyone will keep paying lip service to the legitimate authority of the emperor. Of course I recognize the emperor. Of course the emperor is the legitimate sovereign. Everyone will continue to say that. But in reality, the emperor will basically lose almost all power. He will become a figurehead, if even that. I mean, yes, a figurehead, but a powerless figurehead. And the actual authority of the emperor will completely diminish. So, this is known as the Three Kingdoms period because, we have these different, basically, states forming under these warlords. But technically, everyone recognizes, the one emperor who's supposed to be emperor of a unified China, but it just shows you how little authority that emperor actually has.
Guys, obviously the people weren't too happy that while they were struggling to survive, they were also being heavily taxed so that the eunuch faction could all have rockin' mansions, complete with swimming pools and Alexas.
I mean, this is... that's funny. This is always a bad combination. We can think of the French Revolution, right? We have court officials or aristocrats or rich people, whomever, taxing the poor more and more. It gets worse and worse for the poor, and the rich, well, they're doing just fine. This is a recipe for disaster. Rulers who are cruel, who take all they can from the poor of the country, combined with a ruling class that either won't do anything or can't do anything. We're building up to some sort of rebellion or revolution.
So finally, when a self-proclaimed Taoist wizard came along and was like, you know whose fault it is that we're all out here starving? It's the emperor and his posse.
Yeah.
They've lost their mandate from heaven, and the imperial
mandate of
family
heaven
must be destroyed.
He's got my support.
Unrelenting, furious wrath. Also, check this out. Huh? Can you tell what it is yet? Ta-da!
I mean, look, that would get me on board. I gotta say it. If you did that, I'd be on board with your rebellion.
It's a little kitty cat. Look at her little ears. The people loved his political philosophy. He promised them land reforms, and his followers grew in number. They began arming themselves and wearing yellow turbans. And they...
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yellow Turban Rebellion or whatever it's called. Also, we see the one French guy in the middle here, who's holding a baguette and has the yellow vest on, which in the last couple of years-ish became a symbol of French protest, but that's a fun little detail.
They also developed a really catchy slogan. In the year 180...
Wait, sorry, I gotta go back and see that.
...themselves and wearing yellow turbans. And
almost
they
missed
developed
it.
A really catchy slogan.
The azure sky is already dead. The yellow sky will soon rise. Alright, that's pretty hype. I mean, if sort of yellow is your whole thing, that's a pretty hype slogan. I don't know where the yellow came from necessarily, but that's pretty cool.
Slogan. In the year 184, the Yellow Turban Rebellion broke out across China, with millions rising up against the Han Dynasty.
Yeah, this was a massive rebellion. I mean, the scale is amazing. This rebellion goes on for years, and you have millions and millions of people involved. I will say, as a Westerner looking at Chinese history, I'm always impressed at the scale of these events, because there are just so many people in China, right? There always have been, and there still are today. And so you look at historical events in the year like 200, and you're just dealing with an immense amount of people for that time period.
And the imperial government in the capital city freaked out. With all their internal bickering, they were completely unprepared and unable to deal with such a huge rebellion. So they were forced to call on independent warlords from across the empire to help them deal with this situation. Some big names took part in the fighting. I'm talking the likes of the great Cao Cao, the tyrannical Dong Zhou, Liu Bei, Sun Jian, and many other Chinese names I am definitely not pronouncing correctly.
Fair enough. We just try our best. Unsurprisingly, a lot of those names he just mentioned will become the warlords of the Three Kingdoms period, or sort of the build-up to the Three Kingdoms period, right? I mean, your emperor's authority is so reduced that, you cannot even act through your own chain of authority. Really, you have to call in these outside warlords to come and deal with the problem for you. And so what happens? Well, they become empowered through this process, and they become sort of the sovereign warlords of this new period. While, of course, they all recognize your authority as emperor, of course.
These warlords crushed the rebellion in their own respective regions, and with casualties in the millions, the Han Dynasty breathed a huge sigh of relief. But what they didn't realize is that by relying on all the warlords and their armies, they had essentially diminished their own central control over the empire. And many of the warlords now held the power to act almost completely independently and rule over their own local regions themselves.
And they did.
Back in the capital, the emperor and his son were having a little chat. Listen, I know we've had our ups and downs, and I spend all of my time with your many smoking hot stepmoms instead of you. But what say you and I finally go on a little fishing
Not
trip
again.
Weekend? Oh no, I'm having a stroke! And yet another child emperor was on the throne. This time, however, instead of the eunuch faction gaining even more power, this child emperor's uncle became his regent, who also just so happened to be the head of the imperial army, He Jin. Man, I hate those sneaky, lying, cheating eunuchs. Hey Warlord Yuan Shao, what should we do? Kill them all. Right on.
That's a very military approach to the situation.
Can't kill the eunuchs. They're a vital part of this empire's governance. And also, they paid me a lot of money to say that about
Right.
Come on. No. So He Jin and Yuan Shao decided the Empress may need more convincing. And so they called in an infamous, feared, tyrannical, overweight warlord from the northwest to help convince her. That man was Dong Zhou.
Yeah, Dong Zhou, he is going to be one of the main characters of this period. Yeah, he's one of the big names of this era.
And he set out for the capital city with his army. Hey guys, I heard a rumor that He Jin was planning on killing us. Then why don't we kill him first? And so it was.
Big brain.
They lured him to the palace with a forged letter from his sister, and when he got there, they lobbed off his head. Kill them all.
Yeah, some classic court intrigue, you know. Unfortunately, you have a situation where your sort of political officials, your eunuchs in this case, have committed an assassination to, I guess, you know, save their skin, but the very opposite has ended up happening. Now what you've done is you've given the military side of things, the military men, an excuse to get in there and kill you all, which they already wanted to do.
Imperial forces stormed the palace, and the eunuchs were all massacred. The peasants, who were still suffering from drought and starvation, saw what was going on and began to riot. The emperor and his brother were forced to flee the city, which was now in flames. And the feared, nasty, tyrannical, bloated Dong Zhou had just arrived. He found the emperor and his brother wandering the hills outside of the city. He was understandably confused.
He literally nabbed him.
So he scooped up the emperor, went to the capital, and was like, "Hey guys, what's up? I see the..."
That is, I mean, I don't know exactly how that went down, and if it's as I imagine it wasn't as happenstance as it's been presented here. But from the way I've seen it, he found the emperor, just nabbed him, scooped him up, took him. It's like, wow, that's a rare Pokemon. That's a lucky find.
The capital is on fire. Also, I'm here with my army, and I have the emperor with me. Wait a minute. The capital is on fire. I'm here with my army, and I have the emperor. Screw you guys. I'm in charge.
Exactly.
So now Dong Zhou ruled over the Han Dynasty as
That's really a natural conclusion, honestly. You have all those things together. Of course you're going to take over.
Emperor's regent. His first act was to say to the emperor, "Hey man, no hard feelings, but I like your little brother better, so I'm actually making him emperor instead of you, so you're free to go do whatever you want." Actually...
Yeah, come on. Come on.
Yeah, that feels better.
We knew that's how it was going to go.
Dong Zhou ruled with an iron fist, and he did what...
It's just classic court politics, you know? When I think of... It reminds me a lot of, like, Eastern Roman court politics, which I'm a little more familiar with. But, honestly, when we think about court politics, you might think of China. I mean, China has thousands of years of a very well-developed political system. I mean, more well-developed than most of the world at most of the time. You know, they had this class of scholars and politicians, and, you know... So, you know, this was a big part of their civilization for a long time, and so they had a lot of scheming court politics. I mean, It's got to be more than anywhere else, given the time period and how well developed it was, you know? So I'm saying, you know, it does remind me a little bit of other things I've seen that I am more familiar with, but in many ways, you think of this type of court politics, I feel like China is like the first place you might turn to.
The flip he wanted. He made absolute decisions himself, showing no regard for the monarchy. He had his opponents or those who disagreed with him killed. He broke protocol, doing things like keeping his sword when approaching the emperor.
I like the idea that, you know, it's not that he had his sword with him, like in a sheath, but he approached the emperor just waggling, waving his sword around. Yeah, that'd definitely break protocol.
Wearing shoes in the court.
Not Crocs.
Sleeping in the emperor's bed.
What?
And worst of all, he would walk in the presence of the emperor. You were meant to trot. The other warlords around the empire hated him, and so they said, something needs to be done about this guy. What say we form a coalition and oust him? And it was agreed.
Right, and you know, here's the thing, and this is how you just get the spiral of political instability, right? And first of all, things were not stable before, right? We saw how the emperor was already losing authority. This all started because of the Yellow Turban Rebellion. So there was no stability before, but when you have this warlord come in from the outside and just take over using force, what that says to everybody else is, hey, I can do that too. And so this cycle starts where warlords just keep fighting, right? And they keep taking power. I mean, we saw this, say, in the Roman Empire. And it only stops when someone powerful enough to stabilize the situation takes control. And that can take a long time sometimes.
Across China, their armies amounting to 100,000 men allied together against the tyranny of Dong Zhuo. Yuan Shao's coalition consisted of some of the nation's most capable leaders, including his half-brother Yuan Shu, the great Cao Cao, and Sun Jian. But Dong Zhuo had an ace up his sleeve. His protege and adopted son, one of the most skilled and feared warriors in all of China. It's Lu Bu. This guy was a beast of a man. He never lost a duel, and no other warlord dared challenge him to one. He was also famous for betraying just about every warlord he ever fought for, something that Dong Zhuo didn't seem too concerned about. The coalition attacked Dong Zhuo in Luoyang, and in particular, Sun Jian's forces inflicted a heavy defeat against him, and he was forced to flee to the city of Chang'an. After this initial success, however, the war entered into a stalemate. The warlords in the coalition realized it was going nowhere, and also they all secretly hated each other.
Right.
So they all went home. Dong Zhuo was safe. Until. Legend has it that a government official in Chang'an had a daughter who was hot. Super hot. He invited Lu Bu to his home.
Yeah, legend has it. But also, we just said, Lu Bu, he be betraying everyone. This man was clearly ambitious, so who knows what actually happened, right?
And promised Lu Bu that someday he could marry his daughter. Then, he invited Dong Zhuo to his house and did the exact same thing. Dong Zhuo was so smitten that he insisted on taking her as his concubine immediately. And when Lu Bu heard the news, he was pretty unhappy.
Right.
Hey man, aren't you worried that you stole Lu Bu's girl and betrayal is like his personal hobby? Lu Bu? Betray me? No way, man. Never gonna happen. Ah.
There we go. So once again, you know, I don't know what the historical record says on this, because I'm not a scholar of the Three Kingdoms period. The way they presented it was the legend says. I'm willing to bet that it's pretty unclear what actually went down here. Maybe not. But, you know, as we said, we know Lu Bu, he's a betrayer. He's clearly ambitious. He's very talented. I think it's probably just as likely that he just saw an opportunity to strike and took it, right? That seems, frankly, a lot more likely to me.
Lu Bu, along with other government officials, assassinated the tyrannical Dong Zhuo.
Right.
Then they left his body.
What I'm saying is, Lu Bu did not need the personal grudge. Maybe that was there, right? But maybe not. It was not necessary for this to happen.
In the streets. Some sources say he was so fat and oily, he kept on burning for days.
Okay.
Nice.
No
so
shot.
With Dong Zhuo dead, and the power of the Han government essentially decimated, China was left with a huge power gap, and a ton of warlords who all slept soundly at night dreaming of being the one to fill it. Here we enter into a crazy and chaotic period of civil war all across China, with so many people, so much betrayal, so much intricacy, it makes Game of Thrones look like a Dr. Seuss publication. But just to give you an idea of how crazy and chaotic it was, see if you're able to keep up with this. Are you ready? Here we go. Here's a rough map of the warlords throughout the Han Dynasty.
Right, and some of this fighting and civil warring is what we covered in the Kings and Generals videos, so I'll leave that in the description down below. You can check out that playlist if you want. But there was so much going on here that it would truly take a long time to cover all of it in detail.
Dynasty at the time. Half-brothers Yuan Shao and Yuan Shu were both in a power struggle for who would become the figurehead of their family. Yuan Shu made alliances with warlords in the north, along with Sun Jian, the guy who defeated Dong Zhou. Yuan Shao also made alliances with Liu Biao in the south and Cao Cao, who was an amazing strategist and general.
Yeah,
all of these warlords.
Cao Cao, he's a big name, he's a talented guy. And you gotta remember, by the way, what we're dealing with here is warlords. And so, what does it take to be a warlord? No, what I'm trying to say is that, of course, you need the military expertise. That's a big part of it. But also, you know, you are, in some ways, like an independent sovereign. And you're sort of dealing with, it's not really international politics, you're all sort of part of the same country, but you are dealing with politics across these different provinces, across these different states. And so you also need to be a good politician. That is what characterizes the warlords of this era. Of course, tremendous military skill, but also the ability to scheme and make deals with the other warlords. Both are equally important. And depending on what situation you're in, the scheming and politicking might actually be more important than the fighting, though the opposite may be true in other circumstances. Basically, both are key.
Warlords began fighting each other. Cao Cao began building his own strength by subjugating nearby remnants of the Yellow Turban Rebellion into his own forces. Down south, things weren't going so well for Sun Jian, as he was killed in an ambush, so Sun Ce took over.
Hey, Sun Ce, he's a real G. I remember from doing the other series, Sun Ce, he made a real impression. He's a big name as well. Sort of a flame that burned hot, but burned out fast.
Yuan Shu got pushed back to the river Huai, so he ordered Sun Ce to take the territory of warlord Lu Kang. Then Sun Ce went off to capture territories in the east for himself. Cao Cao's family lived in this province over here. One day, they were murdered. Oh no, Cao Cao held the province's governor responsible, and so he launched a cruel invasion in which he pillaged cities and murdered over 100,000 civilians. The governor
that's a conquest of personal vengeance right there.
Sent out a call for help, and a very popular, likable warlord by the name of Liu Bei came to his aid. However, while Cao Cao was away fighting, a rebellion was staged against him in his home province by none other than Lu Bu. Cao Cao rushed home and defeated Lu Bu, who fled to the
classic
east,
Lu Bu activity
by Liu Bei. Then Lu Bu, surprise, surprise, launched a rebellion against Liu Bei, who fled to Cao Cao. Together, Cao Cao and Liu Bei would go on to invade and...
Hey, by the way, you see the scheming here. You know, no alliance can last. Enemies will become allies. Alliances will break up. You know, nothing is cemented here. Everything is fluid. You could be mortal enemies with a warlord one day. The next day, you have a common enemy. Alright, let's team up. Or even, alright, I'm gonna flee into your province.
Defeat Lu Bu. Lu Bu offered to join Cao Cao, and Cao Cao considered the offer. But his advisors were like, no way, man. This guy's betrayed literally everyone he ever worked for. And so boo-hoo, Lu Bu was executed. Next,
I mean, frankly, a smart move. You really cannot trust this guy. He's clearly too talented and too ambitious to keep alive, right? Or at least to keep on your side. That's the thing. When you have... I mean, frankly, any sort of civil warring era like this, or you're any sort of authoritarian ruler, you want talented people below you. You need subordinates who can get the work done. You need talented generals, you need politicians who know what they're doing, advisors who know what they're doing. The problem is, if you get a general who's too talented, too good at his job, and ambitious, well, he's probably going to overthrow you. So you really gotta be careful, you gotta walk the line.
Cao convinced the emperor to move in with him. Now he's in control of the Han government, something that made his allies very jealous. Yuan Shu, out of nowhere, decides to declare himself...
And you can see right there, we're getting someone who's trying to break the legitimacy of the emperor right now, but we can see that even though the emperor had no actual power, sort of the symbol of the emperor's political legitimacy still meant something.
Emperor of the new Zhang dynasty. Nobody liked that.
Exactly.
His allies cut ties with him.
No one liked that. Everyone was still like, yeah, okay, we know the emperor has no power, and we're the ones who are actually ruling, but we all have agreed to pretend that the emperor has some sort of legitimate authority, to recognize it in some way.
the imperial government ordered everyone to kill him, he tried to flee to his brother Yuan Shao, but died of illness on the way. Sun Ce took over his territory, and then got assassinated. So his brother...
I told you, he burned hot, but not for long. Sun Ce. Once again, watch the other reactions we did. You'll see a lot more of Sun Ce. He was a very skilled individual.
Sun Chen took over. Liu Bei turned on Cao Cao, but got obliterated and was forced to flee south. Yuan Shao finally defeated the warlord to his north and could now focus south. He declared war on his ally Cao Cao, but was defeated at the Battle of Guandu. Cao Cao has now united the north.
That's a big one.
He turned his attention to the south.
You can see right here, you don't need me to tell you, that was a big one. Yeah, a big one in Cao Cao cementing his control over the area.
In particular, Liu Biao's province was becoming a powerful threat, so Cao Cao attacked him. Liu Bei was now fighting for Liu Biao, and he held Cao Cao off for a while. But then Liu Biao died and his son took over, and immediately surrendered to Cao Cao. Liu Bei was horrified, and he fled southward to try and maintain control of the province. Cao Cao was on an absolute roll, and it looked like he would be the one to take control of China.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it right now, you're thinking 3 kingdoms. Nah, there's going to be 1 kingdom. It's going to be Cao Cao's kingdom.
He began making plans to attack both Liu Bei and Sun Qian, and the two of them, seeing where things were headed, met up and decided to form an alliance. Now I know that was a lot to take in, but all you really need to know at this point is that this guy is on his way to taking over everything, and he's about to throw his full weight at the southern warlords. These two have one chance, one battle, to prevent him from invading the south. And that battle was the famous Battle of Red Cliffs. To take the south, Cao Cao would need to control and cross the mighty Yangtze River. He had over 200,000 men to face against Liu Bei and Sun Qian's combined force of 50,000.
Tremendous numbers, once again, I have to emphasize. You know, just Cao Cao has a massive army here.
How would they stand a chance when they were so outnumbered? Legend says most of Sun Qian's advisors pleaded with him to surrender, but then he smashed up a table and they all backed down.
Whoa.
Luckily,
yeah, I love the little, one of the advisors said, "What a psycho." I love it's like, yeah, this epic story smashed up a table and they came around. When in reality, it's like you're at work. Everyone says to the boss, "Don't do this." He smashes the table and everyone's like, "Holy shit, this guy's crazy." Sure, boss. No, I mean, in this case, it ended up working out, but, you know.
Ravaged by disease and exhaustion, and his northern soldiers weren't too comfortable on ships. So when Cao Cao sailed down the river and the two sides met for an initial skirmish at Wulin, Cao Cao was unable to inflict a defeat against the allies. Then, one of Sun Qian's men came up with a very sneaky plan. He sent Cao Cao a letter, pretending that he and others wanted to defect to his side.
You know, in all warfare, but especially in warfare this sort of complicated and messy, the mind games, they can really get you far. It's not only about, you know, just lining up across your opponent and fighting them. It's about playing with their mind, playing a bit of politics. You know, you need to put yourself in an advantageous position. And if you can trick your opponent, well, you're on the way to doing that.
And offered to bring him some of Liu Bei and Sun Qian's finest ships. Little did Cao Cao know, however, that those ships were full of flammable reeds. As they approached his fleet, they were set alight and destroyed his ships in camp. Seeing the situation as hopeless, Cao Cao ordered a difficult retreat through the rain and marshlands, during which more of his men fell to illness and disease.
I love a good bit of trickery in warfare, especially some trickery in naval warfare. Reminds me of, I know this was literally thousands, well, you know, like less than 2,000 years later, but it reminds me of Thomas Cochrane, you know, British naval officer during the Napoleonic Wars and beyond, who pulled a lot of these similar tricks.
The underdogs had won, and Cao Cao would never again have another chance to take the south. Following that, the three warlords took some time to finish off some smaller competitors in their own regions, and by the year 214, China looked a little bit like this.
There you go.
Cao Cao continued to try to penetrate the southern regions, but had no success, and even lost the Hanzhong region to Liu Bei in 217. The former allies eventually fell out over who should own this territory here, with Sun Qian coming out on top. In 220, Cao Cao died of a head disease, and was replaced by his son, Cao Pi. Cao Pi convinced the Emperor of Han to abdicate, and then proclaimed himself the Emperor of the new state of Wei. Liu Bei followed suit, declaring himself the true Emperor of Shu Han. And a few years later, Sun Qian joined in the fun and declared himself Emperor of Wu.
So, as you can see, I talked about how that emperor's authority was important throughout this time period, but we've gotten to the point where I know there's still a lot of fighting and a lot of civil war, but there's been some sort of stabilization, right? Instead of like 20 kingdoms, we're down to 3. And so with this stability comes some sort of political stabilization, and maybe you start thinking, yeah, I don't know if I need the authority of the emperor anymore. I, at this point, can rely on my own authority. Which shows you how weak the emperor was all along, because the second he's no longer useful to these warlords, yeah, you're done.
And so now you have a number of kingdoms in China. How many? Count them. 1, 2, 3.
There we go.
3 kingdoms. Except, actually, they weren't kingdoms, they were dynasties. And when the 3 kingdoms finally formed, not a whole lot happened. For the next 3 decades, they continued to engage in combat, but it almost always ended in stalemate, and nobody really got anywhere. So how did it all end? Did Cao Cao's descendants eventually realize his dream of unifying China? Not quite. Instead, the 3 kingdoms became victims of the usual problems that plagued Chinese dynasties. In Wu, Sun Qian's descendants...
Now we know what's going to happen. That political stability sets in. And that's good for a while, but eventually we get corruption and decline. And, you know, especially with a dynastic system, but frankly any sort of political system, it's really difficult to maintain quality leadership over time. I mean, frankly, that's true in any sort of system. A dynastic system, a democratic system, you know, whatever your system is, you might have one great leader, but what are the chances you're going to follow that up with another great leader? Or another, right? Not very high.
Became a tyrant who was more interested in spending time with his concubines than governing. In Shu Han, a powerful, corrupt, eunuch faction rose up, and by now we all know how that ends. And in Wei, a string of young emperors gave way for a powerful family, the Sima clan, to take control of the dynasty's government. This Sima clan recognized the weak state Shu and Wu had been reduced to, and so they began making plans. I've just received this letter that says Wei is planning to attack us. Should we make preparations for war? Nah, it's probably nothing to worry about. Let's do absolutely
don't worry about it.
Sounds good to me. Wei launched a full-scale invasion into Shu, which fell within a year. Then Sima Yan forced the Wei emperor to abdicate and proclaimed himself emperor of the new Jin dynasty. In the year 279, Jin launched an invasion of Wu and finally unified China in the year 280.
There you go. And it's been unified ever since. Well, no, but... you know, that is Chinese history. Once again, the Bill Wirtz video. It unified, and then it broke up, and then it unified, and then it broke up.
Rising and falling dynasties, division, and reunification would continue in China for centuries to come.
Exactly.
Right now you may be asking yourself, but wait a minute, what would have happened if...
I mean, reunification and division would really continue, I mean, up until the communists took over, right? Like, during and post-World War II. That is the most recent sort of unification of China. I mean, of course, you have the split with Taiwan, and it has lasted to this day, though in the grand scheme, that's only a couple of decades, you know? If we look at the entirety of Chinese history, that's not actually a long time. So maybe China will break up and reunify in the future, I don't know. But yeah, that process would continue basically until the modern era. No, I mean, definitely into the modern era until, you know, like couple decades ago, really. This is it's a pretty recent end to the process, and like I said, maybe the process isn't over. I can't see into the future.
Cao Cao had his way and unified China. Or what if Lu Bu never assassinated Dong Zhou and he continued to rule over the Han Dynasty? What about if one of these smaller warlords had risen to the top? Dang it, what if I want to be a warlord during the downfall of the Han Dynasty?
So true.
Whoa, partner. Calm down, because now you can. This video was...
Yes, so you can check out Oversimplified. I will link their video down below, and you can leave them a like, and, I mean, the sponsorship's probably dead at this point. It's been years since this video came out. But, you know, go show them support, leave them a like, etc., etc. Wow, I had a good time with this one. You know, we've done content on the Three Kingdoms era before, and I very much enjoyed it, but it was good to get a bit of a general overview. I did feel like I was sort of lacking that before. I really jumped into the deep end with, you know, no preparation. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I always enjoy Oversimplified's videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Once again, thank you so much to all of our patrons and channel members out there for showing support to the channel. I really appreciate it. And you can find those down below if you so wish. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I hope you guys are having a good day today, and I will see you all again next time. Goodbye.